Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I want to talk about an intriguing topic that intersects pop culture, branding, and personal resilience. Paris Hilton and her use of an infantilized baby voice to gain popularity. Because, well, that's hot. And that's embarrassing. Now, Paris Hilton is a name synonymous with the early 2000s pop culture explosion. She's often referred to as the original famous for being famous celebrity. People remember her for her role in The Simple Life, her iconic catchphrases like, "That's hot," and this carefully crafted image of a ditzy blonde heiress. But the truth is, there's so much more to her story, and her baby voice persona is actually a fascinating example of branding and survival. Let's start with the baby voice itself. If you're familiar with Paris Hilton's public persona, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. The high-pitched, almost childlike way of speaking. It became one of her trademarks alongside her glamorous outfits and over-the-top lifestyle. But here's the kicker, her voice wasn't real. A few years ago, Paris revealed something that really shocked her fans. During an interview promoting her documentary, This is Paris, she confessed that the baby voice was just an act, a persona she created. She even demonstrated her natural speaking voice, which is much deeper and more grounded. And honestly, hearing her natural voice was kind of jarring at first because it felt like we were finally meeting the real Paris Hilton.
I enjoyed our Zoom call, and I love your jacket. The sparkles are amazing. I wanted to find out who made it later. But I think the most important thing is to not label these kids as troubled or bad.
But to really understand why she adopted the persona, we need to go back to her teenage years. When Paris was younger, she quickly took a liking to the nightlife, and by the time she was a teenager, she was already a fixture in the New York City party scene. We're talking late nights at exclusive clubs, designer clothes, and a lifestyle that most teens could only dream of or get into serious trouble for even attempting. Her parents, especially her mom, Kathy Hilton, were deeply concerned about her rebellious behavior. They felt she was spiraling out of control, skipping school, sneaking out, and partying with people much older than she was. And this led them to make a drastic decision. They ended up sending Paris away to a series of emotional growth schools for troubled teens. One of the infamous schools Paris attended was the Provo Canyon School in Utah. This wasn't just a strict boarding school, it was an institution marketed as a place to rehabilitate teens. But what Paris experienced there was far from rehabilitation. In her documentary, Paris opened up about the abuse she endured at these facilities. And I say these because she ran away from one after the other, so she ended up going to several of these. She described being physically restrained, yelled at, and even placed in solitary confinement, amongst other things. The environment was dehumanizing. Paris recalled being forced to take unknown medications, enduring sleep deprivation, and living in constant fear. She said the staff would strip her of any sense of individuality or autonomy as a way to break her down. What's even more heartbreaking is that Paris felt she couldn't tell her parents. The school had conditioned her to believe that no one would believe her and speaking out would only make things worse.
Yeah, it did bother her, but it was our way of saving you.
Did she tell you she was put into solitary? Treating children like they're in a prison instead of a school?
Are you serious?
This is where the baby voice and the ditzy persona come into play. Paris has said that creating this character was her way of coping. It was like putting on armor. If she acted like nothing could touch her, maybe she could protect herself emotionally. It also became a way to disarm people. By playing into this exaggerated, harmless persona, she could navigate a world that often felt threatening or out of control. But over time, the survival mechanism turned into her brand. People ate up the dumb blonde stereotype, and Paris leaned into it perfectly. It made her the center of attention, the subject of headlines, and the star of The Simple Life. The interesting part is, while the world thought of Paris as this shallow, ditzy blonde, she was actually crafting one of the most genius personal brands of the early 2000s. She was one of the first celebrities to understand that being talked about, whether positively or negatively, was the key to staying relevant. People said she was famous for doing nothing, but the reality is she was one of the first people to capitalize on the idea of being a lifestyle icon. She wasn't just famous for being famous, she was a trendsetter. From her signature pink aesthetic to her catchphrases, Paris Hilton was marketing herself before social media even existed, which is pretty iconic. But let's not forget the cost of that kind of branding. In her documentary, Paris opened up about how exhausting it was to keep up the act. She said she felt trapped by this persona and that it prevented people from taking her seriously.
For a long time, people have misunderstood and underestimated me, but I can understand. But I'm not a dumb blonde, I'm just very good at pretending to be one.
And I think that's one of the most relatable parts of her story, feeling like you have to be someone else to be accepted or successful. When Paris finally revealed her real voice and her real self, it felt like a turning point. She was reclaiming her narrative, stepping out of the character she'd been playing for decades and showing the world who she really is. In sharing her experiences at these facilities, she brought attention to the abuse that so many teens faced in the troubled teen industry. She even testified in court to push for stricter regulations on these institutions, and her advocacy work has already led to major changes. But what's equally inspiring is how she stepped out of the character she created. Paris no longer feels the need to hide behind the baby voice or the ditzy persona. She's shown the world her real self, someone who's resilient, intelligent, and compassionate. Paris Hilton's use of a baby voice isn't just a fascinating, oh, come on, get out of here. Paris Hilton's use of a baby voice isn't just a fascinating individual story, it's part of a much larger conversation about how women in general adapt their voices to navigate the world. Across cultures and settings, many women consciously or unconsciously change the pitch, tone, timbre, and inflection of their voices as a means of survival or to achieve specific goals. And I actually talked about this in my video about why Sabrina Carpenter or why Gen Z women don't use infantilized baby voices. So if you haven't seen that one, definitely check that out after this one, of course. Throughout history, women have often adjusted their voices to appear more approachable, less threatening, or more agreeable in order to fit into patriarchal structures. This can be especially evident in professional settings, relationships, or even public interactions. Oh my gosh. Why do these always get tangled? Softening the voice in conflict. In situations when women might feel threatened, whether emotionally, socially, or physically, a softer or higher pitched voice can signal submission or non-aggression. It's a way of de-escalating conflict and ensuring safety. I'm gonna need you to cooperate here. I'm trying to make a video. Playing up femininity. Similar to Paris's baby voice, some women adopt a more traditionally feminine tone, higher pitched and lighter, to fit into societal expectations or disarm stereotypes about power and authority. This is especially common in male-dominated industries, where a perceived femininity can make women seem less intimidating to male colleagues, deepening the voice for authority. On the other hand, in situations where women want to assert authority or command respect, they may lower their pitch or use a more monotone delivery. Studies have shown that deeper voices are often perceived as more competent and authoritative, which is why some women instinctively make this adjustment in the workplace. That felt weird. What's interesting is that the vocal adaptation often overlaps with emotional labor. Women are frequently expected to manage other people's emotions, and one of the ways they do this is by altering how they speak.
I mean, that's the only thing I thought. That's how I felt. I was like, what has happened? Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, I've been writing a lot, and maybe there's some more, but I would like to do a deluxe.
Inflection and warmth. Adding upward inflections or sing-songy tones can make women seem more approachable and likable, even when they're delivering bad news or asserting boundaries. Vocal fry and perceptions. In recent years, vocal fry has become a buzzword in discussions about how young women speak. While it's often criticized, it's also a way for women to fit into peer groups and pop culture norms, showing how vocal adaptation is as much about identity as it is about survival. When you think about Paris Hilton's baby voice in this context, it becomes clear that her choice wasn't just about branding, it was also a deeply ingrained survival mechanism. Like many women, she used her voice to navigate a world that often rewards compliance, likability, and femininity, while punishing assertiveness and authenticity in women and girls. But these adaptations often come at a personal cost, as I mentioned earlier. Just as Paris describes the exhaustion of maintaining her persona,
I feel like I can finally turn it off and just be who I am, which is such a relief, because it's exhausting having to pretend to like be this like Barbie doll who has no brain all day long, when in the back of my mind I know exactly what's happening.
Many women can feel the strain of constantly adjusting their voices and behaviors to meet societal expectations. And like me doing this video, I feel it, because going from one voice to the other, it can be pretty taxing, because you know you're putting on a show. Obviously for this video I'm doing it to prove points, but to be doing it all the time out in public, that can be really draining. To truly understand how vocal changes function as a survival mechanism, let's explore a few industries where this phenomenon is most apparent. Women in these fields often feel the need to adapt their voices to meet expectations or navigate challenges. The number one example that you probably already thought of is customer service. In customer-facing roles like retail, call centers, or hospitality, women are often expected to sound overly polite, cheerful, and accommodating, regardless of how they actually feel. High-pitched customer voice. Many women adopt a higher pitch and exaggerated enthusiasm while interacting with customers, creating a tone that conveys friendliness and approachability. It's not uncommon to hear women raise their voices at the end of a sentence, using upward inflections to avoid sounding too harsh or direct.
So this is my real voice, and my customer service voice is, "Thank you for calling. This is Allie. How may I assist you?" "Oh, sure, let me place you on a brief hold. Just one moment. Thank you."
De-escalation through tone. In moments of customer frustration, women may soften their voices and speak slower to diffuse tension. This kind of emotional labor can prevent conflicts from escalating, but often comes at the expense of their own emotional well-being. I can't file my nails and talk at the same time, apparently. I'm just like filing them all at once, and that's not how that works, but we're gonna move on. In male-dominated industries, vocal adaptation becomes a tool for survival and advancement. Women face unique pressures to balance authority with approachability, and their voices often reflect this juggling act. Lower pitch for authority. As I mentioned earlier, women in leadership roles often report deepening their voice to project confidence and command respect. A lower pitch can make statements sound more decisive, helping them to be taken seriously in meetings or presentations, like the Elizabeth Holmes example I mentioned in my video about Sabrina Carpenter. Now, I mentioned vocal fry earlier. Interestingly, younger women in these environments may avoid using vocal fry, a raspy, low-pitched speech pattern like this, like I was doing earlier, because it's often, arguably unfairly, criticized as being unprofessional or lazy, even though it's common across genders. But of course, you know, us women, you gotta work twice as hard, they say. No, that's for black people. It works for women too. So it's like, even though guys do it too, women might tend to be criticized for it more because of the patriarchy. Strategic inflections. Women often adopt deliberate pauses or changes in inflection to emphasize points without sounding aggressive, as assertiveness in women is sometimes mislabeled as bossy or overbearing. I'll never forget when I was in high school, short story long, my high school and the high schools in my area in Southern California, they do this thing every year called Air Band, and you put a group together, you make up a dance to a song or a collection of songs, and you lip sync to it. And I wanted to do that with some friends, and I remember a friend inviting two guys to be in the group with us, and I was teaching them the dance that I had made up, and I thought things were going okay, but then the guys started getting distracted and they didn't seem that interested, and I was getting really frustrated. So I just was like, you know, I'll put a pin in this, come back to it later. Like, I don't want to be annoying about it. I'll just we'll just make it up in other practices. And then later I found out that the guys thought I was being bossy, and I was literally teaching them a dance, which means I had to be assertive, but they took that as me being bossy, and I was so turned off by that I was like, never mind, I'm not doing this because I don't have to deal with this for months. That's just it. It's like, if you're assertive as a woman or as a girl, guys sometimes think you're being bossy. I don't know that any of the girls thought I was being bossy. I just was told that the guys said that, so. But anyway, moving on. In the media and entertainment, vocal changes are often tied to branding, just like we see with Paris Hilton. Broadcast journalism. Female journalists often face pressure to use a neutral, slightly lower pitch to sound credible and authoritative. However, they're also expected to maintain warmth and relatability, requiring careful vocal balancing. That is so tough. Oh my goodness. To do that and also seem upbeat and chipper, they must be so exhausted by the end of a filming day, which I assume is every day.
I was a TV reporter for about 6 years, so there were some things that I had to do to take my regular voice, bring it down several octaves, and talk in a much more enunciated way. The bender appears to be over for booming booze sales sparked by the pandemic. That's according to newly released data from Nielsen. That's how I do it.
Acting and voice acting. Women in acting frequently alter their voices to fit roles. For example, childlike, high-pitched voices are often used for cute or comedic characters, while deeper tones convey seriousness or seduction. Yeah, that felt creepy for me too. Content creation. On platforms like YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram, women use upbeat, exaggerated tones to keep viewers engaged and to appear likable, often feeling pressure to conform to what audiences expect from female creators. And I can vouch for that 100% because I definitely am speaking a little bit differently now than I do in my everyday life, because I want to appear likable and chipper, but that's always been, you know, a thing. Like, I was a theater kid too, so whenever there's a camera on me, even if I'm putting the camera on myself, I slightly alter my personality just a little bit. Imagine if I always talked like this. For the sake of the video, you know, it's understandable. People expect it, so it's okay. But it's still, it's a bit of an act, obviously. In caregiving professions like nursing, teaching, or social work, vocal changes often reflect a need to comfort and connect with others. Soft, reassuring voices. Women in healthcare may use gentle tones to soothe patients and build trust, especially during stressful or emotional situations. Enthusiastic encouragement. Teachers, especially those working with children, may use sing-songy tones or upward inflections to hold attention and encourage participation. This vocal style helps maintain engagement, but can also reinforce stereotypes about women as being nurturing and maternal.
Oh, no thank you, Uncle Jim. At holiday dinner, we mind our own bodies. Got it? No, take a look at their face, friend. You made them feel sad, and that is not okay with me. You want to go take a minute in the calm down corner? I put pictures of boats in there. I did.
Across all these industries, the common thread is clear. Women often feel pressure to make their voices fit the expectations of others, whether to avoid conflict, gain respect, or connect with their audience. But this constant adjustment can be exhausting, as I mentioned, leading to vocal fatigue and physical and emotional exhaustion as well. To fully understand why women feel the need to adjust their voices, let's dive into some fascinating studies. These insights show how deeply ingrained societal biases shape how women's voices are perceived, and why vocal adaptation becomes a survival tool. Research has consistently shown that pitch plays a significant role in how people perceive authority and competence. Deeper voices. A study published in Journal Proceedings of the Royal Society B found that people with lower pitched voices, regardless of gender actually, are perceived as more dominant and competent. This explains why many women in leadership roles consciously lower their pitch to project authority. Now, on the other hand, higher pitched voices typically equal friendliness, they're often associated with warmth and approachability. However, they also can lead to perceptions of naivete or lack of expertise, putting women in a difficult position because naturally we tend to have higher pitched voices than our male counterparts. Even if we don't have super high pitched voices, you know, we might be getting perceived as having a higher pitched voice because in contrast to a man, we might. Like in my video about Sabrina Carpenter, I tried to give an example of a high pitched voice and a lower pitched voice. I really thought I was doing a lower pitched voice, and then when I was editing, I'm like, oh, my voice still sounds kind of high pitched. Not like super high, but it wasn't low. It wasn't as deep as I thought it was when I was saying it. Anyway. Women face unique challenges called the double bind, where we are expected to balance authority with approachability. Like I mentioned earlier, how I was said to have been bossy, but I was literally teaching, so you kind of have to be a boss if you're teaching people, but I wasn't being like aggressive or anything. It's just, I think that some boys are kind of intimidated when a woman takes charge. Vocal tone is a significant factor in navigating this. If you speak too low, it can be perceived as intimidating. Women who deepen their voices to sound authoritative may come across as cold or aggressive, particularly in male-dominated environments. So if a man does this, they're seen as deserving of respect. It might be intimidating in either case, but for women it can have more of a negative result. They might react differently to her than they would react to the man. Now, if the voice is too high, then it's perceived as being less credible. So conversely, women who speak in a higher pitch to seem approachable may struggle with being taken seriously. So I have a feeling I was speaking in a lower register back in high school, and that's why the guys thought I was bossy. I don't know. Okay, I'll leave that one alone. I'm clearly didn't get over that one. Okay, but side note is because one of the guys was my high school crush. And so when I found out that he thought I was bossy, it was like a dagger because I only wanted to look good in his eyes. Back to the topic at hand. A study from the American Economic Review showed that women who speak in a monotone or lower pitched voice are more likely to be seen as competent, but are less likely to be liked by their peers. Hence the story. Okay, I know, we're moving on, I know. This illustrates the tricky balance that we must maintain as women. The tone and inflection of a woman's voice can also influence perception of her likability and trustworthiness. Upward inflections, known as uptalk, ending a sentence on a higher pitch, can make women sound uncertain, but it's also a way to signal friendliness or invite collaboration. It's hard for me to actually uptalk at the very end. You see, I kind of still went down a little bit. I should be an expert. I'm from Southern California, the mecca of uptalking. It's known as Valley Girl accent, even though the Valley is a specific part of Southern California, but it's just like broadly called Valley Girl. Cher and Clueless, although I don't know if she uptalked as much, but upspoke.
It's over?
It's over.
Well, how did I do?
How'd you do? Well, let's see, shall we? You can't park, you can't switch lanes, you can't make right-hand turns, you've damaged private property, and you almost killed someone. Offhand, I'd say you failed.
Failed?
Talking like this, it's like you're always sounding like you're asking a question, even if you're actually telling someone something or being assertive. I said, don't touch me. And you're like, are you asking? Or, yeah, I plan to go swimming today. And they're like, do you need my permission? Or, oh, you're just telling, okay. So it can be confusing. Now, warm tones, in contrast, build trust. A study in the Journal of Nonverbal Behavior found that people are more likely to trust individuals who speak in warmer tones, which is why women in caregiving roles often adopt this vocal style. I almost forgot to do the style that I should be demonstrating because I'm talking about it. I'm like doing so much with my voice right now. I think I need another lozenge and some water. This is a copper water bottle that I got for Christmas, and it's supposed to have health benefits, but not supposed to use it too much. As I was saying, so this constant balancing act isn't just mentally taxing, it's physically exhausting too, as I just demonstrated. Like my voice right now is a perfect segue. Women who regularly alter their pitch or tone may experience vocal strain, leading to hoarseness. As you can probably tell, I'm starting, that's why I have vocal fry, because I'm talking too much. Or even long-term damage, which that's That's my actual concern because I'm a singer and I don't want to damage my vocal cords, so I really need to be mindful and not to use vocal fry because that is actually, I can only imagine, bad for your vocal cords.
In an article on the Mayo Clinic by Vivian Williams, Dr. David Lott says vocal fry is the lowest register of your voice. Theoretically, the problem with using vocal fry is that you squeeze the back part of your vocal folds tightly and the vocal folds themselves are really loose. And so, instead of having a nice fluid motion when the vocal folds vibrate, they're vibrating chaotically, and the vocal folds aren't really designed to do that for long periods of time. So the more chaotic the vocal folds vibrate, the more likely you are to develop nodules or scars.
Speech therapists report that many women seek help to manage the physical toll of vocal adaptation, particularly those in high-demand professions like teaching or customer service. The research makes one thing clear. Women's voices are judged differently, and these judgments are often rooted in deeply ingrained gender biases. Paris Hilton's baby voice, for example, wasn't just a quirk. It was a strategic and perhaps subconscious adaptation to a world that rewards women for being non-threatening and approachable. But as more women become aware of these biases, they're starting to challenge them. Whether it's speaking authentically, reclaiming stigmatized speech patterns like vocal fry, which still is not great for your voice, so if you're a singer, I would recommend not talking like this if you can avoid it, or simply refusing to adapt to unfair expectations. Women are finding power in their voices on their own terms. And actually, when I was reading the comments of the video I made about Sabrina Carpenter, there was a whole discussion about women either using a baby voice or a deeper voice to manipulate situations. So I thought it was really interesting to see how many women were commenting on the fact that they themselves manipulate their voices depending on the circumstance, especially if they're working customer service, for example, so that they seem more approachable or deepen their voice to get more respect. There were also some people who mentioned that they hadn't thought about it before, so it was really cool discussion, just seeing everyone's experience, but also the common thread that a lot of women do notice that they get treated differently depending on how they talk. So I do think it's cool that, especially younger women like Gen Z, I think it's cool that they're kind of stepping away from gender norms in that sense. Not entirely, of course, but they're not really as much participating in the patriarchy to the degree that my generation, millennial, did and earlier on. There's like a line, because when you see movies from like 40s earlier on, women did speak in deep voices too. Like Marilyn Monroe used a baby voice, but it was more unique in that sense. Like, it's not like all the women back then were talking like that on screen, at least.
Sorry, I don't think I know you. I believe it's my husband you know. Oh. So Stevens told you? No, he's never mentioned.
Just pinning a medal on you for getting me fired.
And you're a newspaper man.
That's why I'm quitting. I want to go someplace where I can be a woman.
So it's kind of like a pendulum, I feel like. I don't know about Gen X. Sorry guys, sorry Gen X. Sorry Gen X, we forgot about you. Just thinking of my older sisters, they didn't use soft baby voices. But I definitely, personally have used softer. I've also like done theater and sing and everything, so I know how to manipulate my voice like I did in the Sabrina Carpenter video. I think that's because I was trained to be agreeable and likable and people pleaser too. So I found this with a lot of women in my generation, and we had some role models like Paris Hilton's and like the Britney Spearses, and we had the movies like Clueless, and even though Legally Blonde was an empowering movie, I was actually inspired by the end of that. She's still like being really girly and really like giving off the ditzy, but she's still being really assertive. I mean, if you haven't seen the movie, I'm gonna spoil it for you. But you've had a lot of time to watch it, so you know, by the end she helps win a case in the court because of her assertiveness, and she's still able to do it while being girly. So I think that's why I was so inspired by that movie, because I was like, wait a minute, I don't have to change who I am. I can be girly and still get respected and accomplish things, but you know, it is a movie. So in real life I have experienced not being taken seriously because I happen to be more girly and more friendly and more bubbly, and I've even been called blonde black girl, implying that I'm ditzy. And even though I got straight A's in school, even though I took AP classes, even though I've accomplished so many things in my life, just the fact that I present a certain way, and I don't always you know, act super girly or dress super girly. But when I do, you know, it's a give and take, because I often also get treated very well when I'm more girly and more bubbly. So, you know, you kind of take the good with the bad. There is that halo effect that I was talking about, where when I am more bubbly and friendly and girly, people perceive me in a more positive light, in so far as they kind of assume I can do no wrong. But that is part of the infantilization of it all, right? Like, if you're soft and gentle and friendly and girly, it's kind of childlike in a way, and children can do no wrong. We think of them as sweet and innocent. And so if you're presenting like bubbly, like think Disney princess, you know, a lot of people, generally speaking, are going to immediately put you in the category of sweet, innocent, non-threatening, harmless. And that is why some women intentionally, like Paris Hilton, will use the softer, non-threatening voice, because it makes you seem or appear like you are, like I said, harmless and agreeable and more submissive. But you know what? I like being girly, so I'm not a very submissive person at all, actually. There's a book I mentioned in my last video when I was comparing Sabrina Carpenter to Marilyn Monroe. At the end, I did recommend reading. It's called The 48 Laws of Power, and it really does talk about manipulating situations, and sometimes you do have to do it for survival, a lot of times, in fact. And so, yes, I don't want people to think I'm submissive, but there are instances in which it makes more sense for me to appear as non-threatening as possible, so that I stay out of harm's way, so that I can actually get my way quicker than I would if I were being domineering. If I get pulled over by a police officer, I'm more likely to be like quiet, and then if I do speak, I speak very little, agreeable, softer. If I'm talking to kids, unless they're being bad. Even then though, honestly, it takes a lot to get me to the point of like, okay, enough. And I'll use a stern voice, but for the most part, it's like, oh wow, my voice goes higher. Well, you want to appear non-threatening to children, right? And so instinctively, I just go into a higher, oh really? Good job. Wow. And it's so funny because I'm a photographer and I do family portraits. And sometimes I forget to turn that off. And oftentimes I'll be doing family portraits with young children. So I'm speaking to them. Okay, okay. Oh, look at the giraffe. I put a little giraffe on my camera. All right, 1, 2, 3. Oh, look over at the giraffe. And then I go to speak to their parents and I forget to turn that voice off. And I'm like, all right, everybody. And it's really funny because then I'll catch myself doing it. Of the Disney princessification of it all. Huge tangent, but it's just a fun little anecdote. So Paris Hilton's baby voice might seem like an extreme example, but it's really part of a broader pattern. Women have always been expected to adapt, whether it's how they dress, act, or even speak. But as more women reclaim their voices literally and figuratively, we're starting to see a shift, and especially in the younger generations. The truth is, our voices carry power, and whether you're in a boardroom, behind a counter, or in front of a camera, being authentic in how you speak can be a radical act of self-ownership. So the good news is that the conversations around these dynamics are changing. Just as Paris reclaimed her natural voice, more women are becoming aware of how societal pressures influence their vocal choices, and many are choosing to embrace their authentic voices instead. I noticed that younger generations are influencing older generations too, and I'll see people in comment sections saying, I'm, you know, in my 60s. Well, I was watching a video earlier. The woman who was doing the video is a Gen Z. There were a few women who were older who were just complimenting her and just, well, complimenting Gen Z and basically saying how impressed they are with how Gen Z are so aware and so much more self-possessed than older generations were. And it's because wool has been removed from in front of their eyes. Like, they see that the emperor has no clothes. They know that the Wizard of Oz is just a little man behind a big tower. They're just like, you know what, I'm not playing this game. I'm not doing this dance. What's the point? What do I get out of it? Whereas my generation, we were very much sold the promise of the American dream. If you're American, there has been that shift. So like when I was in high school, there was that promise, you know, get good grades, go to college, get a corporate job, work your way up in the company, buy a house with a picket fence, and have 2.5 kids and a dog. And then we started realizing that that dream is not plausible because prices have gone up for everything. And so as millennials, we've gotten both sides of it, where we saw the American dream or the dream and hope of, you know, moving up in the world. And then partway through our journey, we realized, oh wait, for some of us, that's going to be really difficult, if not impossible. But Gen Z, they were never in that stage of the white picket fence promise. When we were here, that's when their brains were coming online. So they missed that whole Disney princessification of our society, pushing that narrative of like the happily ever after. I just think Gen Z isn't falling for that, but also that hasn't been shoved down their throats the way it was shoved down our throats. So for us, I mean, I never went to cotillion, but you would think I did because of the way I was trained. I've noticed that with a lot of millennials, whereas Gen Z, it's more of like, F the system, burn it all to the ground. So, Paris Hilton. Her story is a reminder of how much power there is in controlling your narrative. She used her persona to survive trauma and later turned it into a brand that defined an entire era of pop culture, which is so iconic. But even more importantly, she's proven that it's never too late to reclaim your identity and use your platform to create real change. So, whether it's Paris Hilton, Marilyn Monroe, or the countless other women who've adjusted their voices to survive or thrive, there's one common thread. Voice is power. And reclaiming that power, whether through speaking out or simply being yourself, is always a step in the right direction. So, what do you think about Paris Hilton's journey? Do you see her as a marketing genius, a survivor, or maybe both? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Before I close out the video, I do want to acknowledge that yes, I did leave out pieces of Paris Hilton's troubled past, including her DUI, her racist, homophobic, and anti-Semitic comments, and her support of Trump, which obviously some people won't find an issue with that last one. I did feel, however, that those parts of her past would be great topics for a different video, which I may or may not do in the future, and if I do, they probably won't be on this channel. But I realized that actually it is worth noting because her persona and her use of an infantilized baby voice, well, that probably helped her with a group of people who supported her and overlooked those things even though they may not agree with those things. But also there will be a percentage of her followers who agree with the racist, homophobic, and anti-Semitic comments, so there's some nuance there. And so it is somewhat a reflection on how manipulating your voice and the way you present can actually win favor over others, which of course is the halo effect that I mentioned in the video. Now, I do feel it necessary for me to take some time on the back end of this video to do a bit of housekeeping, and so I'm about to use my voice in a different way. For anyone fixing their fingers to write a nasty, scathing comment letting me know how horrible of a person they think I am because of the insinuation I made that supporting Trump is not a good thing, I want you to take those same fingers and I want you to, instead of writing that comment, click off of the video and go do something else with your life, because I want to let you know right now, I do not care. I do not care if you don't like that I don't support Trump. I'm not interested in changing your mind, and I'm not interested in hearing your opinions about me not supporting Trump. If you take one look at me, I think anyone with 2 brain cells could be able to deduce the reasons why someone like me would not support someone like that. You can have your opinions, and that's fine, but sometimes you don't actually need to let everybody know. And this is, I want to remind everyone, my channel. So if you don't like that I bring up politics for a millisecond, if you don't like that I like to wear cutesy girly things, if you don't like that I like to use my voice in different ways to prove points, then this isn't the channel for you. And that's okay. Let's normalize moving on when we don't like something rather than feeling the need to write scathing comments. I want to be clear, this is not the channel for that. I will not be debating with anybody in the comment section of any of my videos about anything. If you leave an antagonistic comment about any topic on any one of my videos, your comment will be deleted and you may be reported for harassment. Once again, this is not the place for that. I want to foster a community of growth here, a community that supports women, and a community that is interested in learning and talking about fun, girly topics and talking about pop culture. So if that's what you're into, I love that you're here. If that's not what you're into, that's okay too. Sometimes I watch things and I'm like, you know what, that wasn't for me. I don't need to write a nasty comment about it because that's someone else's artwork. The world doesn't need to know what I think about it. Actually, I can acknowledge when something's just not for me, and I think some of us weren't taught that sometimes if something's not for you, you don't have to speak about it. So if your comment is not constructive, if it's nasty and antagonistic, it is not welcome here. For those of you who are still here and are totally vibing with this channel, I am so happy to have you here and I love the support. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and I hope you're having an amazing life.
Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell for more deep dives into pop culture and branding. See you next time.
At this time, I think it's important to acknowledge the devastating wildfires currently sweeping through Los Angeles. These fires, which began earlier this month, have consumed tens of thousands of acres and displaced thousands of families. Tragically, over 12,000 structures have been destroyed and at least 25 lives have been lost. Among those affected is Paris Hilton herself. The Malibu home she cherished, a place filled with countless memories for she and her family, was lost to the flame. Paris shared her heartbreak publicly, speaking about the loss not just of a house but of the sanctuary where she created moments with her children, Phoenix and London. She's chosen to keep her Christmas trees up in her new space, describing them as a little sparkle of hope for her kids during such a challenging time. It's a small but beautiful way of finding light amid darkness. Paris Hilton is not alone in her loss. Her story reflects what so many families in Los Angeles are facing right now: the sudden upheaval, the grief, and the uncertainty of what comes next. But even in the face of such devastation, the resilience of the Los Angeles community is nothing short of inspiring. Neighbors are coming together to help one another, donations are pouring in, and first responders are working day and night to protect as many lives and homes as they can. Paris Hilton's story, and the stories of so many others impacted by these fires, remind us of the importance of community and compassion. It's a testament to the strength we can find in each other during the hardest of times. To those affected, my thoughts are with you, and to everyone watching, this is a moment to reflect on what truly matters: the people we love and the connections we share. Together, we can rebuild stronger and more united. If you're able to help, consider donating to these organizations that are on the front lines providing relief to those in need. Let's keep the spirit of hope alive